Welcome to the Cinematics Podcast. This is the Foreign Affairs second episode, and I'm here with my friend Jesse.
Hi, nice to meet y'all. This is my first time on an episode.
This is his first time doing a podcast ever, and we're jumping right into a French film called La Haine, or La Haine, or La Haine, or La Haine. La Haine. I've heard La Haine more than anything else, but I don't speak French.
Yeah, I frankly just don't care. I say La Haine.
Yeah,
it's cooler.
I've always said La Haine as well. This it translates to the word hate, and the movie follows three youngsters in France during the French, kind of revolutions that were going on in the 90s. It was filmed in 1995, though it takes on a black and white color scaling, which I've heard the director did because it was cheaper. But I actually kind of like to think that we might have watched the same video I say before this.
Probably. Was it 8 minutes long?
Yep. Well, I also watched a 20-minute one after that. But I actually think that I kind of like to think that he did that to make the movie seem kind of timeless. Mm-hmm. And it does have a timeless feel to it. So what are your kind of overall thoughts on the movie? We usually do ratings on movies before we start them on the typical cinematics format, but I don't really think that ratings fit all that well for these foreign movies because a lot of them are just such avant-garde, out-of-the-box experiences, and I've kind of started thinking I might just give a number that it is, and you won't know what it's the scale is. You don't know what it's out of. So I'm going to give this movie a 77,452.
Wow. Probably give it a 2.
Okay.
But who knows the scale? But
I will say I do like this movie a lot.
No, yeah, the movie was fantastic. My favorite thing about it was just the use of the camera and the cinematography and the way they...
And quit looking at the screen, man.
Oh, my bad. I just need to talk to you. Anyways, just the way they filmed certain scenes, like the hallway scenes and especially that balcony scene. Oh,
I think the most beautifully shot scene in the movie, because I just think it's so interesting how they actually had to do it. The scene where he's looking in the mirror, where Vince is talking to himself in the mirror. You know how they did that?
How?
Okay, so think about it, right? So you're in this scene, you are behind Vince, and Vince is talking to himself in the mirror. You see the back of his head, and you see Vince looking back at him. How would they get the camera there?
So they're reflecting his face off of his bald head.
Okay. Obviously, to do it, they can't have an actual mirror. No, they can't have a mirror there because the camera would be in the reflection.
Yeah, so they're using
It's just a cutout in a wall, and the actual Vince is standing behind the wall, and the person that they're recording is another bald guy.
What?
And they're mirroring each other's actions perfectly.
That's crazy.
That's actually how they filmed that scene, and I think that's absolutely mind-boggling. There's a lot of cool things that they did with this movie that you don't... when I first watched it, it didn't really stand out to me that that's why it is so interesting and different, but... They just did a lot of interesting things. And then, you talked about there was the scene where they were on the bridge and there was the Eiffel Tower in the back.
Yes.
That was one of the most perplexing shots I've ever seen in a movie. Mm. And I don't know, the way it's shot is definitely very interesting. It's got a very signature, unique look to it.
I definitely feel that I wouldn't have enjoyed the movie as much if it wasn't black and white. I feel like the color really helped influence the poverty and the disruption and destruction within the towns and cities. But if it was colored, I would probably just be
yeah, because
movie.
Paris is such a beautiful city, or it's supposed to be. In this movie, they aim to show something very dark and bleak out of it.
Yeah.
But the actual plot, considering that a lot of watchers might not have actually seen this movie, because I had never heard of it until I started watching this YouTube channel called Cinema Cartography, which I get a lot of movies from. This movie, it follows three youngsters in France, in the revolutions, like I said. It follows a 24-hour day, just like a full day.
Yeah.
And it's kind of segmented throughout different sections of their day where it will just show what time it is, and then what they're doing at that point in the day. And the actual plot centers around a friend of theirs that you never actually get to meet at the beginning, that had been captured and brutally beat up by the cops. And Vince is kind of the hothead of the group. Hubert is kind of the pacifist, and then there was Said. I don't really.
He's just kind of leading the revolt, but he also wanted to be a part of something realistically.
Yeah. He just wants to be a part of something. Vince is just a hothead. He just wants he wants
angry.
Revenge.
He just wants to kill people and slap people and fight people, but he just doesn't have the nuts to do it.
Yeah, I find Vince to kind of be the product of I think I talked about this the first time when I watched it. I thought Vince was kind of the product of Americans' culture assimilating into the French culture because he's all of them really are, but in particular, Vince is so fascinated by like the American gangster, and he wants to be a gangster super bad.
I agree. Like there was a lot of like Western influence with the way he dressed, the way he like held himself, like walked, talked, and all this stuff. He definitely had some influence from the United States, at least within the gang culture. It was very interesting to see that.
Yeah. And so they kind of throw themselves into situations where they're going to run into cops because Vince he wants to kill a cop.
Yeah, he just absolutely wanted revenge for his friend that I'm sure he barely even knew.
Yeah, you kind of get that.
Wanted to fight someone. Honestly,
you kind of get the sense that they might have known this guy, but not super well. But Vince just wants a reason to crash out.
and like in my opinion, I think it was just like three little hooligans that are just like weren't very significant, and they wanted to be a part of something.
Yeah.
And in my stance, I think Hubert was just like the guy that was just like, hey guys, what
the fuck's going on here?
Chill out, just do your own thing. And Vince and Aside just wanted to look cool, be part of like this revolt that's going on, and just hurt the cops essentially, and just be a part of this.
And you also get the sense because there's that one scene where Syed actually does get the chance to shoot somebody, and or was it Vince that had the chance to shoot somebody?
I think it was Aside.
Yeah, and so I get the sense that Syed, he wants to be a part of something, but he doesn't really have the nuts to do it. Vince is just he wants to kill somebody, just super bad for whatever reason the whole movie.
I think it was Vince, because I remember at some point...
Oh, he threw up. Yeah, because he couldn't kill the guy.
And I think Hubert was telling him, just do it, because like he's been talking about it the whole time.
Yeah.
And he just couldn't do it.
Test his gangster, and it just wasn't there. But yeah, and so they run into the same group of cops throughout the entire movie, these kind of corrupt cops. And the first time I watched it, by the way, I totally didn't catch that they were the same cops every time.
Me neither. At first, I thought it was just like another like gang or just a gang of guys, because they weren't wearing like police outfits, and they were just strolling like a little Toyota Corolla.
Yeah.
But they just pop out of nowhere.
Yeah, it's because these little undercover cops, that was like, I think that was kind of the thing about the revolution in France, was that the police brutality was brought on by a bunch of like ex-war people that were, became cops because they were, kind of violent people themselves.
Yeah.
And so the whole movie is just kind of like a tale about like systemic violence. It's actually super, relevant to what was going on a few years ago. And I think it has sort of calmed down, but politically it was pretty relevant, and it is pretty relevant in America currently. What else was I going to say about it?
I definitely agree that it's very relevant now. The way it's aged through time has just been like so flawless, especially with like the music they chose and then the movie. Hip hop influence, a lot of like French classics. I don't know the name of it, but I'm not gonna sing it either. But, but it was just the way they would use their music, their style, their actions, the way they would speak to each other.
You're talking about that scene where they had the DJ live mix.
I think it was Biggie.
Yeah, and then he also live mixed like that one super popular French anthem.
Yeah, I can't remember.
I don't know what it's called, but
hot, sexy lady singing in French mixed with Biggie Papa.
Yeah, it was pretty badass. And what I like about this movie is that like while a lot, honestly, not all that much happens.
Yes, the movie was definitely a slow burn because like. There was no framework at all. You just see them going about their day, and you're like, okay, what am I watching here? Like, is there anything going to progress? Am I supposed to be understanding something? Is there something in the background that I'm not paying attention to?
Yeah.
And it just slowly moves forward, and then at the end, there's just certain pieces that all come together at once.
It culminates into something that is going to like create chaos and is only going to further the revolution, and you watch somebody basically turn into a martyr. But you don't really get to see the impact of it, but you get the sense that this has kind of been happening cyclically throughout this French Revolution for a while. It's like this isn't like a one-off story. This is like the tale of a martyr that like other people have kind of probably lived before them, and they just get to be like a product of their environment, which is cool. And then also like kind of the reason why it seems kind of formless is because this movie does. Kind of destroy like the norms of like a 3-act story, because you really do just watch like their day go about, and it's like always like the clock is literally ticking, and we just keep getting closer and closer to some big action happening, and then you finally get that big action, and that's what causes the chaos that really could have kicked off the beginning of a normal movie, but you're really just watching how that would have come about.
Yeah, because like your typical movie nowadays is just like beginning, you meet the characters, something bad happens, they try to find a solution, they found the solution and then they beat whatever is going on, and that's just the typical framework nowadays.
Yeah.
But this one definitely went completely abstract and went in a completely different direction. I really appreciated it.
Yeah, and this is like they're hell bent to get revenge for this person, and then they do kind of find order and peace throughout the movie as they just kind of travel throughout, and then make it into Paris. So they don't actually start in Paris in this movie. They start just somewhere else in France, and then they make their way in, and then the actual chaos happens at the very, very end when a few of them die.
Yeah. Spoiler warning.
Yeah.
In case you weren't familiar with this podcast.
Yeah, we always spoil shit on here anyway. That's kind of the point.
Yeah.
But so overall, just really great cinematography. The music choice was cool, though I don't actually remember there being very much music of like a score. There was kind of just that one scene.
There was like one scene, and I remember there was that one where he was just being a complete like skinhead in the sewers, where he's just hitting some Slavic dance moves and had a gun twirling around. Remember that scene?
Oh yeah, and it said Lahan on the wall behind them.
Yeah,
which I didn't notice the first time either. I thought that was
yeah.
cool. Yeah, it was like graffiti tagged in there. There's a lot of cool little Easter eggs like that in the movie. There's also a lot of like weird conversations that like kind of bring out or it kind of brings about like is there a deeper meaning here? And with some of them I actually struggle to find them.
Yeah, I know one of them that I can point out right now is when Vince and Asayid are talking in the background while Hubert's doing like a drug deal or something.
Oh, I remember that.
Can you explain that scene a little more? Because I just like...
I remember that very well because it was like Vince and Syed are like in the background, and then what should be in the foreground is actually happening right behind the camera, and it's Hubert buying weed off of somebody else, and Vince and Syed are the ones talking, and you kind of want to hear their conversation, but you're hearing Hubert's with the drug dealer, and there's just a mural behind them, and it's just a really cool scene. Like, I don't know, they do a lot of weird things with perspective like that.
Yeah, and this is completely off topic. I just remember there's just a random scene of like 3 people just breakdancing for like 10 minutes straight.
Oh yeah, that was a badass scene.
And you just see them walking through this little like, I guess it's just like an abandoned building, and there's people just spinning on their fucking foreheads for like 10 minutes straight. But it was really interesting to see how everyone just kind of was in their own world, and you just had to pay attention to each and every little story that was going on alongside.
Because you really get this like cool like tour like odyssey of like French culture and how it's been influenced by American culture, and that's why I said that I think it's a big theme of the movie. And then there was another thing I was going to bring up.
The cows.
Yes, the cows. There's this weird symbolism with the cows that I think kind of is supposed to be... I interpreted it as their perception of the way that police are kind of corralling people along. Maybe.
I mean, I was just going to say it was just a symbolism for how Vince is beef to the slaughter.
Yeah, that is kind of true, though. That's another valid thing to take out of the cow symbolism. You see cows a few times in the movie, just like kind of. But the reason why I always said it was like police kind of corralling the people along is because that is like literally what happens in the one scene where you do see a cow.
That is true.
You know, and then there was Vin saying that he was constantly like dreaming of cows. Was it? He was like he said he had seen cows in dreams, and he's the one that's always talking about it. And nobody else seems to see them.
Yeah, and everyone's like, "What are you talking about, man? There's no cows nowhere, man."
Yeah, because I mean,
Paris, man.
They kind of just think he's like hallucinating these cows for whatever reason, but that also is like another thing, kind of driving his like the root of his hatred for the police.
Yeah, he just sees cows and he's like, "Damn, I hate the cops." Mm-hmm. But yeah, I definitely think there was like. I remember initially watching it, and I just see these cows. I'm like, okay, there's got to be some significance. So I was just watching the entire movie, just thinking about the cows, and it's never really explained to you in black and white.
They don't explain much of anything to you. And then another one of the scenes that I didn't get the first time I watched it, but I did sort of see the second time, and admittedly, I did watch a video essay. I'm a big video essay guy.
Yeah.
But there was the scene in the bathroom where they're talking with the sort of loony-seeming guy, and he's telling them this story that seems to have no relation to them. About a guy that was like on I forget where they say it was. A train to go to war. It was a train to go to war, yeah, and he was like, he stopped to pee, and his friend was like, come on, you're gonna miss the train, and then he keeps turning around and trying to chop it up with the friend, and then he'd like drop his pants because he didn't have his pants buckled up all the way, and then the train did end up leaving, and he ended up getting left to die because he couldn't lock in.
Exactly.
Which is representative of Vin's in the movie, as he seems to be focused on all the wrong things.
Yeah, and I think the three characters really symbolized, like, Hubert, in my opinion, was the guy that was just trying to pull Vince back into reality, because Vince was just so full of what he believed in and just how he wanted revenge. He was seeking revenge the whole time, but Hubert was about that life, and he was like, "Yo, you don't want to kill a cop. That's just gonna put you in jail. You're gonna hate yourself." And he just kept trying to bring Vince and just convince him. And at some point, I'm pretty sure there was a breaking point where Hubert just like, "All right, fine, here's the gun. Just do your thing. I'm out."
Yeah, it was that scene where you tried to get him to actually kill the cop. He was like, "All right, you really want to kill the cop? Fuck it, but I'm leaving."
Yeah, I'm not involved anymore.
And you get to see like a little bit of Hubert's private life. You get to see all their private lives a little bit. I think Saeed not really as much, even though you do follow him a lot in the movie. But I think that you follow him because he is a little bit less of an impactful character.
He's a little more passive. And
he's driven by everybody else.
He follows the crowd. And that's kind of how the camera was focused too. You just feel like you're part of their group, just watching from the outside. It wasn't very like, okay, this is the main character at all.
But Hubert, you get to see his private life a little bit in a scene where you visit his house, where it seems like, it's a packed house, and you get the sense that, all of these people are not extremely wealthy, like the typical Frenchman. Not saying that the typical Frenchman is, but, you get to see like the chaos in his home. And, it seems like, he's very attached to that home life, but you kind of get the sense that, maybe they've been a little bit more victimized than Vince himself, who seems to feel more victimized than Hubert.
Yeah, I remember Vince lives in a house with his family, his sister, and everything, and he's the most belligerent out of all of them. Hubert's living in like a little more modest location, and same thing with Assad. And when they all come together, they're always at Vince's house, and he's living the life. He's got a nice stereo. He's got a hot sister.
He's got a nice life, He's got that badass ring that says Vince.
Man, that ring was so cool.
I want a ring like that so bad.
Connor.
No, not like that. I mean, but like, if I had a cool name, I would do it.
You could put DeCorte.
That's a little bit of a long thing to put on there.
To connect your hands together.
This is totally sidetracked, but I've always wanted to get one of those, like, it's like one of those rings that kind of looks like a skeleton, like going across your hand, and it kind of like culminates into like a wrist piece kind of thing.
Bracelet kind of.
Yeah, and I kind of want to get one of those for like the next time I DJ. I just think it'd be sick.
That would be sick.
But that's all to say. The looks in this movie are really awesome. Like they kind of inspire like a style that a lot of people want to have. And
especially today,
yeah, because that 90s streetwear style is so popular now. And they really just those fits that they were putting on were
fire.
Sick. Yeah, I know. We couldn't get over how cool the outfits were in this movie.
I know my fangirling self. I just immediately was like, yo, this winter I'm going to dress like El Haine. It's going to be so cool. I'm going to get a bomber jacket, and I'm going to get some Sambas, and I'm going to look exactly how Vince looked. I
mean, shit, I got the Sambas on right now. If anything, I'm more El Haine than you right now. I haven't seen a bomber in your collection in a minute.
Hey, I'm about to whip out a bomb if you keep talking like that, for real. Anyways. The uniform and the style and everything that they brought out definitely influenced a lot of I will say hip hop nowadays. Would you agree?
There's a lot of hip hop culture influences, and that's another thing where they're super influenced by American culture. There's another scene where they're talking about Looney Tunes characters, and they're relating them to gangsters, and that was another scene. That was the scene where I really realized that a lot of the point of the movie was the influence of American culture on them, because. They're just bringing about like two totally American things that they seem to not really totally understand all that well, where they're just talking about like literal Looney Tunes characters and comparing them to, classic gangsters.
Oh, yeah.
And then also the first time I watched it, I couldn't tell if they were actually talking about some like made up gangsters that they were like, that they knew, or if they were actually talking about Looney Tunes characters, but I'm pretty sure they're actually just talking about Looney Tunes characters.
I'm pretty sure they are. The way they were just bringing up how, I think it was
Tweety Bird and
Tweety Bird.
Was it the Sylvester the cat?
Sylvester, yeah. I think they just liked the names, but they didn't really understand that it was just like a little yellow bird in like American culture. Like it's not gangster at all, but they just thought it was hard.
Yeah. Whatever assimilates over there, they want to relate to whatever they also know about American culture, and that was kind of cool.
One thing I wanted to I just couldn't understand. I thought it was just funny. Like every single insult that Vince threw at that in the movie had to do with either someone's sister or their mother.
Yeah.
And he was just the way he would have his arguments. The way he would just express his hatred was just in the most belligerent, like vulgar way possible.
Yeah.
And even if it wasn't a scene where it was like significant just to be rude, he just always had a reason to hate someone or hate the people like standing across from him. He just had something to say.
Yeah.
And like in the scene where it was just stealing a hot dog, the hot dog was like 10 cents. He's like, all right, man, you can just have this hot dog. Just give me like a quarter.
And so he takes another one.
And he said, like, I'm going to have sex with your mother. and for no reason. And it just brought out this like idea that Vince just really wanted to stir the pot. And all of his friends were like, yo, just pay for the hot dog, man.
Yeah, he's just that one guy that's going to get everybody going, even though they kind of hate it.
Yeah.
You know? The hatred is a huge theme of the movie, and it's also just the name of the movie translated, you know. And then I also really love watching how that destroys every situation that they have, where they could have seen something beautiful kind of come out of it if they would have just waited and if Vince would have like kept his mouth shut.
Yeah.
But they destroy everything that they're a part of. There's the
That's
scene
true.
in particular, like I think of the scene where they they go into the art gallery. And there's those cute girls there, and they all want to start talking to the cute girls. And Vince ruins it all. Or no, it was Syed that ruined it all. Syed said something fucked up to one of them, and then Vince starts just breaking the art.
Yeah. and he starts calling like whores and like they're dirty and stuff. And Hubert was like raising a girl up, and then he was like wingmanning, I think, for Vince. And Syed just comes in. He's like, "Hey guys, let's have sex."
Yeah.
And the girls are just like, "Yo."
That's exactly what it was.
And then Vince starts going crazy.
Vince just starts breaking stuff. That's another scene where it's like, you know, if these hot-headed kids would have just like kept their mouths shut and seen, you know, what could have come out of something if they didn't immediately turn to violence, they could have seen something really great come out of it. You know, not obviously just being sex, but, you know, these were, you know, cute girls that are going to an art gallery and seem like they could have been pretty classy individuals that could have changed their lives in a good way.
Yeah.
But they're just really not fit for that because of, you know, their teenage angst, and they just start breaking things and literally destroying their scenario. And then another scene that kind of comes to my mind when I think about them, like if they could have just like waited, they could have seen something really beautiful, was the scene where they were on the bridge and the Eiffel Tower was in the background, and they talk. Or no, this is the scene where they were on the rooftop and they were all smoking.
Yeah, they were all smoking. I was about to bring that up.
They got real high on that scene, and they were talking about you know, that the lights are supposed to turn off on the Eiffel Tower at midnight, and the clock struck midnight, and they looked at it for like a second and they didn't turn off. And they were like, oh, it's just a fucking lie. And they turn around, you know, just like everything in our lives, you know, and they turn around and then the lights turn off. They could have seen something that's like a really beautiful cultural thing about, you know, France, you know, and like admired the Eiffel Tower for one more second. And they could have seen those lights turn off, which they really wanted to see for whatever reason. And they didn't get to because they were so hot-headed and quick to do the next thing.
And I think that goes into play with today's attention span, dude. TikTok,
yeah. No,
they couldn't even focus for 15 seconds,
you know.
And they lost a really beautiful moment.
Yeah.
But no, I agree. They also had this scene where I think they were just chilling on. I think it was the bridge scene where they were just chilling. They're just talking about what they want to do with their day, and instead of just going about their day, they see the cop car drive by, and they just start arguing with them and start calling them names and eventually go up to them and start like, hey, get out of here, this is our spot. And they just lose that moment. They were just being chill friends, just I think it was eating lunch or something, and it just ended up being a complete violent situation where they had to eventually get away from.
Yeah. And then you know, the end of the movie also had like sort of a trippy element to it whenever they're all like super high and they're pretty much homeless in Paris, and they're just like sitting in an airport. And then Vince disappears, and you get a scene where he's chasing, or he finds a cop and he shoots him. And in his mind, he's shooting him with the real gun, and he goes flying through the window. And then they end up finding Vince, and none of that had actually happened, and he was holding just like finger guns. Just symbolizing his violence. Another thing that I think is really interesting about this movie, and I don't think there's anything to write home about here, but I just think it's cool that all these characters, you know, they are totally original characters, and they're based on, you know, actual martyrs in this French Revolution, but all the actors' names are actually just Syed, Hubert, and Vince. Like
they didn't have last names?
No.
Oh, no.
Well, they're real life names.
Really?
They just gave them their real life names, yeah.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah. I almost kind of wonder if the director kind of let their actual personalities just kind of like blend for a while, just had them be friends and then use those character dynamics, or if they were actually just written to be, you know, like that. I don't know.
I can see at least Vince and Hubert just being the way they are normally.
Because none of these guys are big actors.
Yeah, they just seemed like some random guys that they found and just they looked the part, and then they eventually took up the part by just being who they were.
Yeah. Yeah, I like, and the movie is like, very small budget. They didn't have these big budget actors, but it's also like one of those movies where you can just see that, a big production studio and a lot of money and a lot of talent is not necessarily what you need. What you need is a good vision. And,
Absolutely, yeah.
And, I think there are some actors, I think Vin's actually starred in other things after the movie, but Hubert and Syed I don't think actually had very prevalent acting careers, but again, it's just a testament to the fact that these aren't necessarily big super talented actors, but they fit their roles so well, which is why I originally wondered if these are actually just how these people sort of acted and they just kind of played a little bit more of an exaggerated version of themselves and they just let the cameras roll.
And I think that also helped with like the whole nature of how the movie progressed.
Yeah,
because it didn't feel like things were being like over like dramatized, and it just felt very raw and very like how it should be in real life. It wasn't gonna be oh my god, authentic. Yeah, it just felt like you were there with a bunch of like a group of guys and they're just doing their thing as normal, and you can just follow it along as if it was just like some absolutely like you said, authentic moment.
Yeah, just some authentic day. It almost feels like a real story. And it feels too real to have been like actually made up, but it's a testament to his storytelling that it's it seems very real.
And I think how it really helped build up to the ending. The way it ended, it just felt so. I remember when I first watched it, my jaw dropped, and I was like, "Wow!"
Yeah.
And we were like silent for like a whole like minute or so. Just watching that happen, you're like, wow, I can't believe that just happened.
Because in the same way that like Tarantino movies kind of have a talkative nature to them and they're thought-provoking in their conversations, this movie's the same way. I remember we were talking through a lot of the movie and just kind of like gushing about, their conversations and, how they were dressed and things like that. Because not, like we said, not all that much actually happens. It's just kind of like a cool odyssey of French culture up until the very end where, was it, I think Syed got shot, and then Vince pulled the gun on the cop, and the cop pulled the gun on him, and you don't really know who died. Wasn't that how it was?
I think it was, okay, so they kidnapped that cop.
Yeah.
Originally. They beat him up, and they're threatening to kill him, but they don't, and then they leave him.
And then they run into him again.
And then they run into him again as the group, and I believe, I think it was Assad was getting his ass kicked by him.
Yeah, Syed.
Or Syed, yeah. And he comes, and then Vince and Hubert come and help him out. And I believe Hubert pulls the gun out, or not Hubert, Vince pulls the gun on the cop.
Right.
And then something happens to where they get Vince, and then the cop just negligently discharged their gun.
Yeah.
And it is just completely shocking to see how, even though they're cops and they're like trained, allegedly, you just see how chaotic that moment was, and
see what the hatred really brings about.
Yeah. And it seemed like most of the people in that story had no idea how guns would actually function. It was just like a power symbol, like, hey, I have this, so if you mess with me, you're gonna die.
Yeah.
But none of them really understood how serious and how severe that actually could be, with like how much responsibility that came with.
It was a huge revelation and power tool to them, that the fact that they actually found that gun in the sewers, and they were just, mostly Vince was just super excited to be able to actually have the power to kill somebody.
Yeah.
And that power came with great responsibility.
Foreshadowing.
We're recording an episode on Spider-Man today. But yeah, that's kind of just the gist of El Haine. Watch the movie. It's great. It's on YouTube. It's free. It's 1995, and it's it's a very influential movie. I want to think. There's a lot of really cool things about it. There's a lot of cool stories you can bring out of it, and it's pretty relevant to today. So I definitely recommend the movie. Of course, I don't know how, like I said, every movie that we're gonna do on foreign affairs, I don't know how to rate. I didn't know how to rate Possession. Possession and La Haine. I'm gonna do that every time.
Lahinga-dinga.
They're two of my favorite movies, and I would rate them both 10s, but I don't necessarily think that that's super fair.
Yeah.
They're just some of my favorites.
And they're like totally different. Each one of these movies are so different in their own ways.
Yeah.
I initially said as soon as we finished the movie, I was like, wow, that's probably like top 5 movies
Yeah.
I've ever seen like in my life.
Yeah, he said it was one of his favorite movies.
You just like, it's so different. You can't really like compare it to anything else.
Yeah.
So
that's the great thing about these foreign films. I guess let's go on.
I do want us to say, like, if you're gonna watch this movie, you got to give it its time.
Yeah.
Because we watched it and we're like, what's going on?
Yeah.
Just give it its time. I swear, it's worth it. It's so worth it.
It's worth that development because, like I said earlier, it's not like your typical three-stage story arc. You know, it really does kind of like start off with like what could be like a chaos. With the Kai being captured by the police and beaten half to death. And you kind of expect them to like kind of go to war about that a little bit more, but as time keeps ticking, they kind of find a little bit of order and they continue to cause chaos for themselves as they're hell-bent on getting revenge for this person that you feel like they might not have even really known all that well. And then you finally get the actual chaos at the end of the movie, and it's kind of up to you to determine what would be the stakes that would follow what just happened in the movie. So you really do just get like it, and that's all just so that you feel the weight of their deaths, because you get to know the characters extremely well.
Yeah.
That's one of the best things about this movie is that you do get to know the characters extremely well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say. Just get to know the characters as you watch it. Just feel like you're part of it. Mm-hmm. And then the whole movie will just carry you along and make you feel the way you're supposed to feel at the end.
And it's a good movie to watch with friends too, because it like we said, it brings up a lot of like conversational things we were talking throughout the entire movie, but we still were able to focus on it.
Mm-hmm. We were able to pull a lot of like self-made theories. I remember they would bring in a lot of Christianity. Like they would quote like I believe a couple saints or something like that in the movie, and we were just wondering like, is this relevant, or are they just saying this, or what's going on? But there's a lot to pull from it as the movie goes on, but you can't really put it all together without just giving it some like reflection after. Yeah. So.
It also does definitely lend itself to multiple viewings.
Oh yeah, 100%.
You can take something different from it every time if you focus on something different. I wonder, focusing on a different character every time that you watch it, if that would really give you a different perspective every time, because all their perspectives are so different.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good take. I would probably do that next time I watch it.
Yeah. And there definitely will be a next time. Though I didn't watch it before this. I watched like 3 video essays, so. But I've watched the movie I think 2 or 3 times already, so I didn't really feel like it was all that necessary. I know the basic plot, Mm-hmm. Anyway, I suppose that'll do it for the second episode of the Foreign Affairs section of Cinematics. It's been a real pleasure.
It's been a pleasure to be here.
Yeah.
It's a great first podcast for me.
Yeah, watch the movie. I don't know if we're going to do that whole watch the news thing on this Foreign Affairs podcast that we do on Cinematics, but I guess if Casey were here, he would probably want me to say, go watch the news. Casey says that at the end of every Cinematics podcast.
Go watch the news.
Go watch the news. I said it once on accident, and then it just